rejoice and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
Hello, and welcome to the Fox Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. We're glad you're here and joining us today. We'll turn now to our chalice lighting. We come together by the light of this chalice. Please join me in our words for lighting the chalice. And if you are joining us on Zoom, we invite you to light a candle or chalice at home. We light this flame as a symbol of new life, enlightening our way, as a symbol of the warmth in every human heart. Let the lighting of this flame rekindle in us the inner light of hope, of peace, of love. May we share that light with all people.
Good morning. We're so glad to welcome you to the Fox Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship this morning. Whether you're joining us here in this room or from home. My name is Tom Pennenberg. I'm a member here since the 90s. I did it because I have a desire to remain spiritually healthy. If this is your first time visiting the fellowship, I want to extend a special welcome. Now, back in the day, Vern de Bruin introduced me to this fellowship where questioning is valued, and I got involved with the coming of age program pretty early on, and that program is for our youth, our teenagers, to write their credo, to say what they believe, give their heart to what they believe in. And in order to do that, I had to model that behavior and write my own credo and what I give my heart to and what I believe in. And that was a real growth experience for me. I also was a member of or am a member of the men's group here, and that helped my self-esteem grow a lot. My spiritual life flourished as I found new ways to be of service for our community, so I want to thank this community for that, and I want to thank everyone who's made this morning's service possible. It's time now to settle in. Take a deep breath. Become aware of your body wherever you are. Allow yourself to come to this sanctuary so we can be fully present at this time together.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning again. Just a note that for those of you who are attending our service this morning here in the building, if you are okay having your photo taken, we encourage you to sit on this side. If not, this side is where we will not have pictures taken. Catherine McKenzie is our fellowship member photographer, and we'll be taking pictures to update our website. We don't have any pictures since before the pandemic, so thank you for being here and participating. I wrote this morning's responsive call to gather in honor of today's service theme. When I indicate like this, your response is fear not and open your heart. Let's try that together. Fear not and open your heart. When fear grips our land, sweeps our communities of reason and hope, it's easy to make monsters. Monsters are the other. They are frightful and vicious. Monsters can be vanquished without guilt. Fear not and open your heart. Vampires, zombies, werewolves, Bigfoot, witches, demons. Fear makes monsters where none truly live. To open our hearts is an act of courage. It is vulnerability amid the storm winds, flashing lightning, and gathering shadows. Fear not and open your heart. But to open our heart calms the storm, casts light on the shadows, shows the monsters to be what they are, our fears personified. To open our hearts is an act of power, to reclaim our humanity and the humanity of those vilified and monstrified by fear. Fear not, and open your heart. I want to make sure, as we have gathered together in this space, that we welcome in those who are joining us from home on Zoom. So in a moment, we will show those of you who are home on Zoom on the screen here, so we invite you to turn on your cameras. And those of you here in this room, I invite you to kind of turn toward the center and wave to those at home. All right, ready? Hi, everybody at home. We're so glad you're here. And there's the people at home. Yay. Oh, so glad to be together, even from our separate spaces. Thank you for being here this morning.
We, as Unitarian Universalists, strive to encourage a spiritual stance of abundance, rejecting a scarcity mindset with fear and shame around resources. We take time this and every week as a moment of practice, taking stock of what we have, cultivating peace when we need to ask for support, and giving with joy whatever we are able to offer. For those of you who would appreciate some support, we are here to help. Please do not hesitate to reach out to Reverend Christina, Reverend Leah, or myself if you are in need of financial or emotional support. It's a joy for us to be able to offer help on behalf of this beloved community. And if you're one who is feeling stable and able to give, we ask that you do so in a spirit of abundance. There are many ways to give to the fellowship. You can give of your time and talent, and we especially do need financial resources to allow our ministries to thrive for the months and years to come. If you are here in the sanctuary, you can feel free to come up to one of our offering baskets, which our ushers are holding in the back. You can also raise your hand if you would like an usher to come to you. Or you can feel free to donate online via our text to give function on a smartphone. Anyone here in the sanctuary or at home can donate online. Thank you. Your gifts are deeply appreciated.
I invite you now to join us in singing our settling song number 318 in the gray hymnal. The words will be on the screen in front or in the Zoom chat if you're with us from home. We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding.
is true. We would be one in living for each other, to show to all a new community. Our first reading is adapted from an article entitled Fear of the Other Comes from the Monsters We've Created by Brian Regal. We humans have been creating monsters all the way back to the earliest civilizations. Even before that, our Neanderthal ancestors likely saw monsters around every corner and in every strange face, the same way we still do. You can tell what scares people the most by the monsters they create. The Sumerians, the Babylonians, and the Egyptians had hosts of monsters they had to deal with. The Greeks had so many monsters to worry about, we still talk about them. The ancient Greeks created the centaur, half man, half horse, for example, because of their anxieties over neighboring people who might enter their lands. The Cyclops helped them explain the terrors of the unknown, while the Sirens did the same for their fears of what lurked on the islands of the Mediterranean. In the Middle Ages, fear of foreigners caused Europeans to conjure up the concept of monstrous races as a way of explaining new and different people they were encountering in Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. Stories of dark-skinned people or any people a little different from themselves led to belief in people with no heads, but faces in their chest, people with one giant foot, or dog-headed people, and others. Foreigners weren't just different, they were dangerous. Monsters brought plague, famine, pestilence, and other horrors. Today, the monsters might look a little different, but the underlying ideas are the same. Throughout history, political and religious leaders have stoked fear and hatred in their followers by pointing out how they, and it doesn't matter who they are as long as they are not us, will do terrible things to our nearest and dearest if we don't crush them down before they invade and infest our pristine lands. There are things to worry about in society, but immigrants and women and gay people are not them. Don't let someone convince you witches are working against you. They will not call them witches.
Thank you to Alex, who is our worship leader today. This is Alex's first time as a Sunday morning worship leader, so great job. Our second reading on this, our third week of Monster Month, is adapted from an article entitled, What the History of Witches Reveals About Our Own Fears by Dr. Christine Contrada. We often associate witches with the European Middle Ages. And yes, that was an epoch when the devil freely roamed the earth as a nuisance, but he did not have much power at that time. The Reformation, the separation of the Protestant faiths from Catholicism in the following centuries, increased the fear of the power of the devil, so witches were suddenly everywhere, and a cause of great concern. Between 1450 and 1750, thousands were tried for the crime of witchcraft. Tremendous stress and confusion created a craze. It was easy to find yourself labeled as an other and an enemy of the social order in the midst of a violent cultural revolution. There are no specific statistics on how many were tried, how many were tortured, how many were executed. A witch craze was rare, but it devastated communities. Men, often clerics, identified witches. Manuals were created to aid those on the lookout, the most notorious of which was the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of the Witches, which was written in 1486 by the Dominican Inquisitor Heinrich Kramer. He focused attention on the feminine identity of subjects, although witches historically were not gender specific. More than 80% of those accused of being witches in the early modern period were women. These willful females were often independent professionals, healers, and midwives. The fear of female power often targeted elderly women who were marginal in society because they had lost the oversight of male kin and their reproductive role after menopause. Now, unlike many of the sites around the world meagerly acknowledging the history of witch hunts, Salem, Massachusetts has a rather elaborate memorial consisting of 20 stone benches identifying the 14 women and 6 men accused of witchcraft and executed for witchcraft in 1692. The city is one that has pridefully embraced their legacy. It outdoes itself each Halloween with a celebration met with mass tourism. But there is nothing romantic about class conflict and political factionalism in the community in the late 17th century, which led the people of Salem to falsely accuse their neighbors of fraternizing with the devil. Pressures of a puritanical society and patriarchal society set the stage for repressed teenage girls to find themselves happily and oddly at the center of attention for the first and only time in their lives. Embracing the limelight, they proved quite theatrical in the courtroom. Now, there were no witches in Salem, but there was fear, hatred, envy, and repression. Calling someone a witch is an insult most often directed at women. But powerful women? No. It reflects the fear of women who do not conform. Those that might snatch power like doctors, jealous of midwives, clergy driven mad by stricter celibacy, and religious authority trying to destroy cults in which women had power. Witches are a sign of increased social and political turmoil and economic stress. We are a society under such stress. Think of that the next time you see rows of pointy hats in your local drugstore.
At one point in high school, I sat across from my friend and she asked, "Do you believe I'm going to hell?" At that moment, I was paralyzed. My high school self knew what I had been taught through my Lutheran upbringing. Yet, as I sat across from one of my closest friends, a professed pagan, there was a resounding discord between my head and my heart. I answered with an uneasy, "I don't know." In actuality, I knew very little about paganism, but driven by a deep sense of curiosity, compassion, and care, I desired to know more. So I turned to the books and read up on the subject. I was surprised by what I discovered. Many of the traditions, principles, and beliefs of my Lutheran faith were similar to those of pagan traditions, but through reflecting on my friend's day-to-day actions, there were, of course, notable differences, but through reflecting on my friend's day-to-day actions, I found that in the end, we were more alike than we were different. Images of bubble, bubble, boil, and trouble were replaced by individuals on a divine spiritual journey, seeking to connect with nature and worship a chosen deity. It became difficult for me to go to my Lutheran church. If there was a God that was all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-loving, couldn't that God be a goddess? Commonly referred to in the Christian doctrine as Father, wouldn't this God understand the principle that the combination of nature and nurture endows each person with a unique lens through which they view the world and the higher power? I decided that if there was a higher power I was willing to believe in, they would be adaptable to the details. I drew a parallel between God and tea. Everyone takes their tea differently, yet the rigidly religious seem to declare that tea is only tea in its purest form. If you were to add honey, cream, or sugar, it's in some way inferior. Yet for me, I choose to replace fear with compassion, division with love, and tolerance with a sense of celebration motivated by curious understanding. I juxtapose tolerance and celebration intentionally. In short, tolerance is not enough. Tolerance feels like a passive permission to exist, in the way a lingering illness is tolerated until it is overcome. Tolerance seems to denote a sort of putting up with of something that we hope will one day go away or otherwise become irrelevant. It's reductive and insulting to apply this idea to one another or the beautiful intricacies of identity. As I grew into adulthood, I became familiar with my own uneasy response of, "I don't know," even as I discovered my own otherness. As I discovered my own place among the GLBTQ community, the very same question confronted me in the mirror every day. Do you believe I'm going to hell? I was already versed in the typical biblical responses, yet rather than dwell in any sense of self-loathing or denial, I approached my own identity with the same compassion, unity, and celebratory curiosity I'd applied to my friend. I quickly accepted my own self-image as unique, intricate, and beautiful. I am privileged to state that personally, these were simple steps I took in drama school, practically submerged in the alphabet soup of LGBTQIA and all the other letters that make up these wide-ranging identities. This past week, we celebrated National Coming Out Day, and I am reminded that for many, what for me were simple first steps can sometimes seem like unfathomable leaps into the unknown. Again, I wish I had a sufficient answer. Yet for those struggling with their own sense of otherness, my deepest wish for you is a gentle compassion, love, and celebration motivated by curious understanding.
When I was a kid, I had a recurring nightmare that I was in the living room of our house and there was a witch. She was the quintessential creepy Halloween witch with greenish skin and a pointy black hat, raggedy robes, and long bony fingers. In the dream, the fingers were the scariest part because she was poking around the house trying to find me so she could tickle me. Look, I hate being tickled, okay? I've always hated it. And being tickled by an evil witch with extra uncomfortable fingers, it was literally the stuff of my nightmares. Usually in this dream, I would crouch behind one of the chairs, squished between the back of the chair and the corner of the wall, and wait, breathing shallowly, hoping she wouldn't find me. The dream would always end when she would find me. And there I would be, trapped between the wall and the furniture, as her scary face peered over the back of the chair. In later years, I was fascinated by any story involving a witch. Hansel and Gretel, The Wizard of Oz, Wicked, among others. It was that childhood fear that drove the fascination. I particularly loved reading the book Wicked, which the later musical sensation was based on, because it had such a rich exploration of Elphaba's past and her relationship with Glinda, the wicked witch and the good witch. Now, witches are, unlike the other monsters that we are exploring this month, real. Maybe not real in the same way that Hansel and Gretel or Wicked would make them seem. But there are thousands upon thousands of people who practice modern forms of paganism, or Wicca, among others. The 2014 Pew Research study determined almost 1 million people in the United States identify as practicing paganism or Wicca. That's way more than identify as Unitarian Universalist. Many of these practitioners explore and use forms of spells or workings and manipulation of energy or magic, although many do not believe that this is a supernatural thing. Instead, it is part of the natural world that intentions and power can influence. Within Unitarian Universalism, there is a large group called the Covenant of UU Pagans, which exists to uplift, support, and connect Unitarian Universalist pagans and encourage our Unitarian Universalist congregations to honor earth-centered traditions, to use music, dance, and ritual more often in our services. Here at the fellowship, many of our members identify as pagan, and we have a group that meets monthly to honor the sacred cycle of the seasons. All of this to say, clearly there is a lot more to witches than the historical demonization of them. And I honor the pagan religious path as a powerful and valid path toward inspiration, meaning, and connection. So why is it that witches have such a bad rap? Why are they found among the monsters of Halloween, feared and maligned by so many in the past and in the present? Historically, the answer lies in a combination of societal stress and the persecution of otherness. Yes, the church had a lot to do with it, giving religious backing to the hunting, trial, and execution of thousands of people found guilty of the crime of witchcraft. And I am not excusing the historical Christian church for its crimes in this matter. However, I want to take a moment to recognize that with or without the church, the original answer remains the same: societal stress and the persecution of otherness. I took a class in seminary that was taught by 3 professors: an ELCA Lutheran pastor, a Zen Buddhist priest, and an Islamic professor of religion. The aim of the course was to explore religious dialogue across the range of themes. One day, someone asked the Islamic professor, I can't recall, maybe it was me, if the world would just be better off without religion. Far fewer wars, terrorists, hate crimes, all of that. History without the Inquisition or witch hunts. This Islamic professor was thoughtful for a moment. And then he said, humans will always find a way to hide behind the greatest good that they can think of, to accomplish their own selfish, hateful, or violent ends. He went on to explore various non-religiously motivated evils in our world and what people were hiding behind. The war at that time in Iraq, freedom. Hitler's extermination of millions of Jews, disabled people, and others, purity. The eugenics movement, science, and improved health. I could go on. Who thinks freedom or purity or science and improved health are evil? But of course, they can be twisted to accommodate evil acts, and people often hide behind their idea of God to commit atrocities. The professor's point was that God is often the greatest good that people can conjure in their minds. But this does not make the idea of God evil. God also inspires incredible faith, hope, generosity, and altruism. It just makes humans humans. So I do not mean to minimize the role of faith, religion, God, or the devil in the centuries of witch hunts. Please do not hear me minimizing that. But neither do I want us to casually brush off this history with an easy explanation of religious fervor and outdated theology. It's too easy to do that and then think, we don't do that. Humans are still humans, and this kind of othering and persecution can and still does happen today. I called my sermon this morning Monsterfication, because I hoped that we could explore together the idea that humans make monsters out of the things that frighten us. As we heard from Dr. Christine Contrada in our reading earlier, for the author of the witch hunting manual Malleus Maleficarum, the fear was women, particularly women who didn't conform. Quote, these willful females were often independent professionals, healers, midwives. The fear of female power often targeted elderly women who were marginal in society because they had lost the oversight of male kin and their reproductive role after menopause, which was terrifying. This is what it means to other someone, to minimize their humanity, to make them into a two-dimensional figure with caricature features. Any propaganda artist understands this powerfully. The propaganda of the Third Reich whipped up fear of Jews, while in our own country, the Japanese were described and envisioned in media as large-toothed or even fanged animals. Propaganda does a really good job and often makes people into vermin. If you Google propaganda, rats are the most common image, or some sort of beast or monster. The recent attention to Native American residential schools and the atrocities committed in those institutions reminds us that the first director of one of these schools, a U.S. military officer, famously said that the goal of the schools was to, quote, kill the Indian in the child and save the man. This belittling of identity, separating it entirely from the person's humanity, Indian man. This is what othering looks like. And when that is combined with societal stress, things can get very scary very quickly. The First Church in Salem, Massachusetts is a Unitarian Universalist church. On their own website, they describe their historical role in the Salem witch trials of the early 1690s. You see, Unitarians are the descendants of Puritans, along with our religious cousins, the Congregationalists. Now, this is what they have to say on their church website. Quote, "2 of our full members were excommunicated and executed in the ensuing events of that year, Giles Corey and Rebecca Nurse. In addition, many members of our church participated in and supported the witch hunt that quickly consumed the entire area. Many of these people have later recanted and publicly apologized." They continue on their website to say, "There were no real witches executed in 1692. There were only innocent women and men falsely accused in a mass hysteria that underneath had as much to do with personal vendettas, grudges, and greedy land grabs. The real evil that existed in Salem did not reside in the 136 people who were imprisoned and the 20 more who were executed. Rather, it lay in the accusers and judges who believed that what they were doing was righteous and holy. To understand the larger context for witch hunts involves being aware of the extreme anxiety and tensions that existed across Europe and later the English colonies, and to heed the human impulse to scapegoat the other during times of social turmoil and conflict." End quote. 2 of the stressors that were among many facing the colonists in Salem were a string of very harsh winters in a time that was marked by cold. And this is fascinating. Witch hunts all seem to fall between the mid-1400s and the mid-1700s, which scientists and geologists note was a time of globally suppressed temperatures. They call it the Little Ice Age. And the coldest winters in our hemisphere fell between 1680 and 1730, right when we see what was happening in Salem. Also, the Massachusetts Bay Colony had recently had its charter revoked and replaced in 1691 with one that gave the English crown far more power than it had had previously over the colony. The colonists were terrified of a crackdown from the government and the religious authorities an ocean away. And they had every right to fear that crackdown. It had happened in other colonies. Those stressors, combined with the human impulse to create an other and make it a scapegoat, led to the tragedy of the Salem witch trials, of which our religious ancestors were both the persecutors and the persecuted. As I think about these phenomena, I wonder, what can we as Unitarian Universalists do with our human impulse to monsterify, to make monsters of those things, especially those people that we fear? And how can we engage with others who might be doing the monsterifying? I can think of a few examples of this impulse. The bathroom and sports-related bills that have targeted transgender people in the last several years are an attempt to make trans folks into some sort of threat, when in fact it is they who are far more likely to be the victims or survivors of physical and sexual violence than being the perpetrator. Those who seek to monsterify trans people are those who are afraid, usually afraid of something much different and bigger going on, and whose fear looks like anger and hatred. The monsterfication of undocumented immigrants, especially in recent years, is another example. The use of the words illegal, illegals, or even aliens to name these people, and the accusations that they come here to wreak havoc, to incite violence, or to bring illness, are ways that those who wish to perpetuate a myth of national homogeneity continue to monstrify those who come to our borders. I also think of the political and social factions in our nation right now, and boy, are they divided. How each side wishes to make monsters of the other, whether it be Antifa, or the movement for Black Lives, or the Proud Boys, or QAnon. We can find ourselves appalled at this monsterfication. I can't imagine how they could do that. Or maybe acknowledging that perhaps we are doing it as well. What does the monster look like? What do they act like? In every case, you can know that you're doing this if the result is something horrible. They don't have much mind, they can't think for themselves, they're dangerous and scary. And without a doubt, these monsters are never real, and they are always the result of othering. And of course, our society is under great stress. Climate change, climate crisis, economic crises, rapidly shifting and changing demographics, extreme wealth inequality, and of course, to top it off, a global pandemic that has killed hundreds of thousands of people and left many others with long-term illness, while testing the ties that bind our community as we have faced countless shutdowns, mandates, and fights over masks and vaccines. Our faith calls us to what Alex so eloquently said in their reflection. It calls us to compassion, love, celebration rather than simply tolerance, all motivated by curiosity. Our second Unitarian Universalist principle names compassion as a guiding force in our faith, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Love. Love is a central theological tenet of our faith. Our call is always to side with love, and I'll get back to that in a moment. Celebration. Our third and first principles call us to celebration rather than simply tolerance by honoring the inherent worth and dignity of every person and by accepting and encouraging each other. And finally, curiosity. I've come to believe that there are many opposites to fear, and curiosity is one of them. Curiosity is part of our fourth principle, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the stance of wondering, the theological position of asking questions and not being certain. But back to love, though. Love is another of the opposites to fear. Not mushy romantic love, but the powerful act of revolutionary love, radical love. Our Universalist ancestors gave us this gift. It was they who, in the 1800s, surrounded by the religious fervor of Christian sects that emphasized hell and damnation. There was actually a very famous sermon at that time by Jonathan Edwards called Sinner in the Hands of an Angry God. It was at that time that our Universalist ancestors rejected that fear. They rejected the fear of God and instead embraced a loving God, one that loved all people and would send no one to hell. That's where universalism, the word, comes from, universal salvation. And they believed in a God that was worthy of our love, and a God that inspired them to try to love their human siblings the way they believed that God loved them. Now, whether you do or do not today believe in the same God that our ancestors believed in, that radical love is still a part of our tradition. It's a part of our modern faith. We reject fear as a tactic. We reject fear as a tactic, and that is a spiritual practice to do. And we embrace love as an act of resistance in the face of societal stressors and forces that try to separate, minimize, other, and monsterfy us and those around us. May we hold our faith close as a comfort and a strength in resistance to fear. May we remember to be compassionate, to celebrate each other and our differences and not simply tolerate them. May we always be curious, guided by wonder. And may we always strive to embody the radical, universalist love that can overcome all evil. Amen. And may it be so.
Please join us as we sing together number 1023 in the teal hymnal. The words will be up on the screen as well as in the Zoom chat if you're singing from home. We'll sing it together 3 times. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
We are people of all ages who bring our joys and concerns to this time together. We hope that here you experience a welcome that helps you to find connections of mutual support, a spirituality that helps you find meaning, peace to ground you, and a zest for rediscovering life as it unfolds. We invite you to let us be a resource in our common quest to celebrate happy moments, seek healing and wholeness, and continually rediscover whoever and wherever we are on this path of existence. For those of us joining in person after the service, you can feel free to place a stone in our fellowship chalice as a symbol of our loving community surrounding you supportively. Or you can join a member of our care team by the bowl of stones in the back, who is happy to offer a listening presence. For those attending virtually, you can share in the chat box whatever joy, concern, prayer request, or intention might be on your heart or on your mind today. We now place a stone in our chalice on your behalf. For care and connection during the week, please feel free to reach out to myself or Reverend Leah or to contact our office. If you'd like to be included in our weekly care email, feel free to email anyone on our staff or fill out our website form. May the joys and concerns we share with each other, or those we simply hold in our hearts' silent sanctuaries, may they draw us together so that our joy is amplified, our sorrow comforted, and our life's journeys witnessed. We now turn our attention to the joys and concerns wider than those of this gathered community. We allow our mind and heart to reach out in ever-widening circles outward like ripples in water. This act of heart expanding might be joyful, or it might be uncomfortable, or it might be even a little painful. And our faith reminds us that stretching ourselves to this awareness is the first movement toward creating a community more filled with love and justice. Our first stone is for the joys, concerns, and transitions that are here among us. And as our water ripples out, we add another stone to expand our hearts to the wider Fox Valley community and to the state of Wisconsin. This week, we honor the descendants of survivors of Indian residential schools, 10 of which schools were run here in the state of Wisconsin. We honor the small step taken by our governor this week to acknowledge and to apologize to representatives from the Oneida Nation and the Stockbridge-Munsee Mohican tribe, who were there to accept this small act of reconciliation. We pray for continued action to support our indigenous neighbors, including through reparations and environmental healing. We add another stone for the United States, which celebrated National Coming Out Day this week. We honor all of the transgender, genderqueer, non-binary, bisexual, lesbian, gay, and queer people throughout our nation who have come out or who have not yet found that they are able to do so. We pray for the full recognition of humanity and rights for people of all genders and sexualities. And as those ripples continue, we add our final stone for the wider world, a recognition of our deep interconnection with those across borders and across oceans. This week, we hold the ongoing severe shortages of fuel, food, and all manner of supplies throughout the world due to supply chain breakdowns around the globe. May this crisis enlighten us and our leaders to the powerful ways that we are all connected. We enfold all who are celebrating and all who are suffering in the embrace of our hearts, and we commit ourselves to acts of compassion and justice in service to those circles beyond our own. May this moment of silence help make it so.
Our time together is coming to a close, which means our time to return to the world and to our daily lives is beginning. Our hope is that each week, when we worship together, we provide each other with inspiration and empowerment to connect our values to our actions. Remember that there are always ways to get connected here, both in person and online, and to live your faith more fully. Be sure to read the weekly Scroll e-newsletter. I'm going to say that again. Be sure to read not just open, but read the weekly Scroll e-newsletter. There's so much good stuff in there. Cindy Polakowski is a gift, and she does an amazing job, and you deserve to see how amazing she is. So read the Scroll, or if you're not yet on that mailing list for that incredible e-document, then you should ask to get put on the mailing list. Check the back of the order of service for some teasers in the Scroll about what is coming up this week. Coming up soon is a special 2-hour program from the Leadership Development Committee, and I invite up Elizabeth Van Sickle to introduce that for you.
Hello there. My name is Elizabeth Van Sickle, and I am a member of the Leadership Development Committee. And I know that sometimes leadership can seem scary, but it's not. We would like to take an opportunity to demystify and demonstrify involvement and leadership in the fellowship. Check this out.
Ever wonder how to participate in the annual meeting? Or who owns and runs the fellowship? What are all the groups and committees, and where might I fit in? Then you should think about attending Under the Hood, where we're going to open up the hood of the fellowship and look at some of the intricacies of how our community runs. And you'll hear from some of the fantastic leaders of the fellowship, like Teresa Hanna, Mary Ellen Bixta, Ann Fisher, Bob Williams, Brian Merton, and Marty Wheeler. So you best stop by for Under the Hood on Saturday, October 30th. Oh, and did I mention we were able to compress 24 hours of content from our normal class with just a few minor cuts into only 2 hours? That's right, you can learn all about the fellowship in only 2 hours. You can't afford to miss this limited time opportunity. So be sure to attend Under the Hood in 2 hours on Saturday, October 30th, starting at 10 a.m. Psst, you should come.
So hopefully that has piqued your interest. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to come and find me after the service. I will be in the fellowship hall. Otherwise, you can always reach out to us or Cindy to register. Hope to see you there.
Thank you, and thank you to Justin, who is the chair of our Leadership Development Committee, who made that amazing video. And Elizabeth will actually be outside the front doors because we're not in the fellowship hall right now. As we prepare our hearts to leave this gathering, we invite you to ponder what you wish to take home with you. What lesson, idea, or theme will you carry with you from this time together back into your daily lives? So I want you to think about a word or a couple words that encompass what it is you want to take home. If you're on Zoom, we invite you to type your word into the chat box. And those of us here in this space will say together our words, a joyful chorus of our intentions for the week. Don't leave your neighbors hanging. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
As we come to the end of our service, we will extinguish our chalice flame, even as we still hold its light in our hearts. Please join me in our unison words. As we extinguish this flame, let us go our ways with hope in our hearts, with our spirits renewed, and with a deeper understanding of life's mystery. Let us carry the light of compassion and commitment to build a better world. After our closing words, we're going to hear a short postlude song. We invite those of you who wish to stay in the sanctuary for a time of sharing and conversation about the themes of our service with today's worship leader, Alex. Everyone else is welcome to use that postlude time to log off if you're joining us online, or if you're in the room, to make your way out of the building so that we can allow for our systems to circulate clean air. And with that, go in compassion, connecting with curiosity and with love. Go in peace, knowing that we wait to embrace you upon your return.